Can you explain your own personal fascination for the macabre?
I think really it gives one an opportunity to express the violent in understatement. It's the melodrama, you see, that you play against. That's what I'm interested in.
But some would say that...
Sorry, old chap, but I have to kill you. I hope it doesn't hurt. You see.
Good evening, Mr. Hitchcock fans, and welcome to a review of one of the director's earliest and most critically lauded thrillers, The 39 Steps. 39, you say, but I haven't even seen steps 1 through 38 yet.
What are the 39 steps? Come on, answer up! What are the 39 steps?
A bloody great film is what it is, sir. The 39 Steps concerns Robert Donat's Richard Hannay, who, while attending a London music hall one evening where gunshots sound off throughout the crowd, ends up bringing back the mysterious Annabella Smith to his flat. While Hannay cooks up a fish supper, Smith claims that she set off the shots in the hall and is a spy in the know of a plot to steal British military secrets. She mentions about an enemy mastermind with the top of his little finger missing, and something about the 39 Steps.
Listen, I'm going to tell you something which is not very healthy to know. But now that they have followed me here, you are in it as much as I am.
How do you mean?
Have you ever heard of the 39 Steps?
No, what's that, a pub?
During the night, Smith is murdered, but in her dying breath is able to warn Hannay to get out while he can, and leaves him with a map of Scotland with the name of a village circled. Now implicated in Smith's murder and on the run from both the bad guys and the law, Hannay must pick up where Smith left off and head north to unravel the mysteries at play, clear his name and prevent the bad guys from getting the something secrets that'll be bad for England. And that's the last time Hannay's picking up a random woman at the music hall. I mean, she takes his bed for the night, entangles him in espionage, and eats his lovely big bit of haddock. I should point out there's not a euphemism, he genuinely does just cook her up a nice bit of fish. The pace with which this thing gets going is really something else. It's a remarkable bit of economical storytelling. Robert Donat is a terrific lead right from the off, and very much the archetype of lots of the director's leading characters.
I've always, ever since 39 Steps, taken average man and put him in bizarre situations. Cary Grant in North by Northwest, Joel McRae in Foreign Correspondence. So the audience identification is so much the stronger.
While I certainly wouldn't call the incredibly charming, handsome and dashing Robert Donat an everyman, he certainly doesn't lead a terribly remarkable life until becoming entangled with Smith, which happens incredibly quickly.
Well, there we are.
May I come home, monsieur?
What's the idea?
Well, I like to.
Well, it's your funeral. Come on, then, there's a bus.
I always used to find this quite jarring as a kid. You just don't think that characters in older films like this are gonna be so willing to just, hook up with each other, but maybe 1930s Britain was actually a lot more sexually liberal than I give it credit for. From Smith's perspective, she's using Hannay as an excuse to get away and hopefully lose the men who are tailing her, but he's never met this lady before. He's like, yeah, sure, you can come back. The pair don't end up sleeping together, I guess because all of these spy stories were a bit of a turn-off for Hannay, or maybe the smell of the poached fish wasn't the biggest of aphrodisiacs, but regardless, I think it's a really effective shock when Smith appears killed. I think this setup does a good job of making you think that these two could be the leading pair of the film, and Hannay will join Smith on some kind of adventure as her accomplice, and that's all kind of turned on its head when Hannay has to go it alone. I also love how, despite the whole spy threat of the film being against Britain, neither of these characters are British. Hannay is a visiting Canadian, and Smith, by her own admission, and despite her German accent, is just willing to work for the highest bidder.
Now, I suppose you've come over here to dig up some great, big state secret.
No, I'm here to save a secret from being dug up. Not because I love England, but because it will pay me better that way.
It's a very small detail, but the lack of any kind of patriotic attachment really helps convey this attitude of just, God, how did I get myself into this? Hannay is certainly not bound by any sense of duty or service. At least at first, he is just very in this to save his own hide. The next chunk of the film follows Hannay on his trip up to Scotland. There are some very funny scenes in here. I love the milkman that Hannay convinces to loan him his uniform for a disguise, and at first he's really open with the guy, but he's all like, spies and secrets, just pull the other one, but as soon as Hanny makes up some story about having to slink away from a night with a married woman to avoid her husband, he's all like, oh yeah, why didn't you say so? Sure, whatever. There's a lovely irony at play in the humour, and that does run throughout the entire film as well. There's nary a dull moment throughout this whole sequence, particularly on the train, where if you're not amused by the underwear salesman's conversation, then you're probably thrilled by Hanny's attempts at escaping the attention of the authorities while confined on a train. Shout out to one of my favourite cuts in all of cinema here as the body of Smith is discovered at Hanny's apartment. On the train, Hanny is forced to improvise a bit to get the police off his tail and ends up forcing a kiss on Pamela, played by Madeleine Carroll. Her unwillingness to cooperate leads to a terrific chase throughout the train, punctuated by a few nice gags where one of the porters is just clueless that anything out of the ordinary is going on and he's just going about preparing Hanny's dining table for him. The whole film is filled with brilliant little touches like that you might not even pick up on first viewing, but I just find this such a rich film to revisit time and time again. Once Hanny escapes the train, the next sequence concerns a few scenes set at a home of a poor crofter, played by future Dad's Army alumni John Laurie and his much younger wife, played by Peggy Ashcroft. It's quite a shift in tone for a little while. There's still plenty of tension going on, but after the fast-paced excitement of some of the previous scenes, things do slow down a fair bit, and while I don't think of the 39 Steps as a terribly emotional film, there is a really tragic quality to Peggy Ashcroft's character. You quickly get the sense that this marriage is far from loving, and her character was more than likely forced into things, and the momentary presence of Hanny in her life gives her this jolt of excitement. She wants to help him, where her husband would happily turn him into the authorities for any kind of financial reward. He doesn't care if Hanny is innocent or not, so long as he can make money out of it. She gives Hanny one of her husband's coats so that he'll blend in with his surroundings better as he escapes, and as he leaves he kisses her goodbye, and the camera just lingers on her character for just a few moments, silently, and it's really the only moment like it in the film, but God does it hit me in the heart every time. Just this disappointment that the character is expressing. She wants so much more out of life, and then there's this charming man and this exciting plot that he's wrapped up in. But this is not the film about the meek crofter's wife making it away with the dashing hero. So Peggy Ashcroft stays at the farmhouse, and barring a short scene of domestic abuse later on in the film, off screen, her character doesn't appear again. But for what this episode is, I love it. It's its own lovely little thing. Her character brings a different energy to the film. Love it, love it, love it. It's then back to the chase as Hanny is pursued over the Highlands by the police, and I love this whole sequence. A good chunk of it is shot on location, and I love location shooting in older films, just these snapshots in time of a place. But the chase ends with Hanny arriving at the Scottish village he was aiming to get to, and specifically to the main house of a large estate. He starts spinning his tale to the master, Professor Jordan, only for it to be revealed that Professor Jordan is the criminal mastermind, missing the top of his little finger that Smith warned Hanny about earlier on. Professor Jordan is played by Godfrey Turle, and despite logically being the main villain of the piece, he's really hardly in the film at all, and if it weren't for his finger, I don't know if he'd make that much of an impression at all. I know it's always a bit of a trope for cinematic villains to have some kind of physical disfigurement, and Bond villains certainly lean into that trope too, but it's interesting to see such a relatively minor version of that trope going on here. It's just memorable enough that you never forget about it, but it's also small enough that Jordan can pass off as an ally of Hanny's for a little bit. Now, I'm certainly not saying the one thing missing from the 39 Steps is more Godfrey Turle, but typically you would just expect the main villain to be more involved, but maybe that would detract from the fact that it's essentially Hanny against the world through much of this film. Every single other character is someone for him to be initially suspicious of, whether they're law enforcement, potentially foreign spies, or just average citizens who might think that they're doing the right thing by dobbing him in. So perhaps it is for the best that the main villain kind of barely appears to maintain this sense of just never-ending potential antagonists. It's an attitude that the film cultivates. The villain certainly makes quite the statement, though, in his first big scene, shooting Hanny at point-blank range. I love the economy of the filmmaking here. We see Hanny shot, and then we cut back to the farmer, who's asking his wife where his coat is because he had left the hymn book in the breast pocket, and then we cut to Hanny and the police chief laughing about how it saved his life, despite the improbability of it. And I love it when older films get a little bit meta like this.
Cigarette cases, yes, but I've never seen it happen to a hymn book before, except on the movies.
And this bullet stuck among the hymns, eh? Well, I'm not surprised, Mr. Hanny. Some of those hymns are terrible hard to get through.
But I love the economy of just zipping through the thing just to get Hanny into the next interesting situation. It probably would have been one chase too many to see the hero escape from Jordan's house. Particularly as we spring right back into Hanny evading the law again. Turns out the local sheriff is a good friend of Jordan's, so off Hanny goes, but this time with handcuffs hanging from his wrist. I love how he just bursts through the window. I love it anytime anyone in the film gets out of a situation by just throwing themselves out a window. Hanny inexplicably finds himself making making an impromptu speech at a political rally where Pamela, the lady from the train earlier on, appears and is able to alert the authorities of the wanted man. I love how much Hanny is able to rile the crowd up here. It's one of my favourite scenes in the thing. Hanny is captured, and at this point we're more than halfway through the film, but from this point on, Hanny is teamed up with Pamela. The pair are manacled together, and I'd go so far as to say that this is the iconic stuff from the film, and what it's probably best remembered for, the odd couple antics of these two while they're shackled together, and it's a great excuse for Hanny to change up his performance a bit. He has some fun kind of insinuating that maybe he actually is the murderer, and then he's like, well, what if I am? And she's stuck with him like this. The chemistry between the two actors is lovely, by the way. Another favourite cut of mine here as we go from the studio-based shot inside the car to the exterior on location, but it's just so seamless. I love it. Once the pair escape, they go to a nearby inn, and again, more iconic stuff here with the pair stuck together, but they can't let on anything. She thinks that he might actually be the killer, and he might kill her, and he obviously doesn't want to let anyone know that something's up. She does eventually come around to the idea, though, that maybe he isn't a psychopathic knife-in-back woman killer, and the sexual tension is palpable, and this is clearly feeding off of some of Hitchcock's own kinks.
Oh, I think that the handcuff and tying up is a highly sex symbol. I think it's highly sexual, the handcuff.
I'm not going to go into too much detail about the last 20 minutes or so of the film. I feel like everyone should watch this film, and if you don't know the ending, it's probably for the better, but speaking broadly, I think the ending does a great job of bringing everything full circle, but, and I feel like I have this criticism of a lot of Hitchcock films, the very end of it is so abrupt, and I know that Hitchcock wasn't a huge fan of tacked on, like, final scenes showing what the characters are doing in 5 months' time, and if he did do them, they were always incredibly short. No, he's very much like, once the plot is over, then whoom, you're out. But here I would have especially loved just to have a few more minutes with these people. And don't get me wrong, the ending works and the last shot is just absolutely superb and perfect, but maybe it's just a testament to how much I'm enjoying these characters and enjoying being in this world that I just didn't want this to end. The world Hitchcock creates here is just so much fun to be in. If it's not thrilling or suspenseful, then it's probably humouring you or making you laugh. And that's great. From as soon as Hanny goes on the run, every scene becomes a potential suspenseful set piece. Scenes can turn on a dime depending on who walks into the room, and it's just so expertly crafted. The actors are all terrific, and Robert Donat in particular is just such a great leading man. Much like a few of the James Bond actors, he's just so effortlessly charming and cool, and he can have his tongue firmly in cheek and play up the elaborate situations that he finds himself in, but he can also ground it and make it feel real. Like, this character is really in danger, and it takes a real skill to judge that balancing act. Performances like this don't get nearly enough credit. It's perfect, and the chemistry he has with Madeleine Carroll is wonderful too. She's a great foil, and despite being in the film far less than you'd expect or remember, she is just right in this part. I know that for some people, a nearly 90-year-old film can be a bit of a hard sell, but if you're ever tempted to dip your toe into 30s movie thrillers, I'd highly recommend starting with this. It's a sensational bit of escapist fun in its own right, while either laying the groundwork for, or downright perfecting tropes and conventions that would become synonymous with espionage entertainment in the years to come. This film's influence reaches far and wide and is essential viewing for any movie buff.
It's true, I tell you every word of it.
So if I haven't already made myself clear,
Watch the 39 steps.
it's certainly necessary viewing for anyone getting into Alfred Hitchcock's work, and so long as you're not put off by films that are made in the 1930s, I think you're going to have a really great time with it. It is such a fun spy thriller. Thanks very much to Patreon supporters for supporting this channel and voting for this. Along with Torn Curtain, they were part of a poll of Hitchcock films, and these two won out, so that's why I've done reviews of these two, and I'm really hoping to get to talk about more Hitchcock films in the future. He made a heck of a lot more spy films, and there's a lot to say about them, so yeah, if you want to find out details on becoming a patron to support this channel, then please do use the link below to find out more. Also below, you can find links to my social media pages, including my Facebook page and my Twitter page, so do follow me on those. And hey, subscribe to this channel if you would like to stay up to date on future video uploads. And of course, let me know your thoughts on the 39 steps in the comments section below. And with all that being said, and until next time, Hitchcock fans, so long for now.